for attending today. We got a great, very informative webinar on task today. Larry's going to go through the software piece of AxTrax and dig deep. So get ready, roll up your sleeves, and get a whole bunch of information. I'd like to start off, as always, talking about how to find us and get all the good social media plugs and that kind of thing. I'll start off today with the YouTube channel. I would certainly appreciate it if you guys mosey over there and hit subscribe. We are trying to get a vanity URL so we can be like a real YouTube channel. But if you just search out Rosslare Security Products North America, you'll find our smiling faces there, and we'll be, like I said, most appreciative if you'd subscribe. We won't blow you up with all kinds of alerts and that kind of thing. We post typically about one video a week. I'm behind on posting some of them, so you'll see some more come up here soon. But it would these webinars will be on there, so for replays and that kind of thing, you can come back and check them out here. In addition to our Facebook Lives that we do semi-regular. We've missed past couple because of some technical gremlins, but we try to do those once a week there on our Facebook group, which is a great transition to, if you are into Facebook, I'd highly encourage you to come over to our Facebook group. We have not only, this is our quickest way to get information out to you. It is we'll have, like I said, weekly Facebook Lives, and we'll try to target a particular item or particular product or particular solution and do a quick little Facebook Live. We'll also post leads on here. They go here first typically. So if you have if we have a call in for a service or install, we might get that information out to you there. Also, we have the AxTraxNG website. This is a site that Larry runs there, based out of South Lake. Larry, do you want to talk about it much?
Sure. So AxTraxNG is just a portal I put together where you could get to manuals, the videos and guides. Now the ones that are on here right now are a little bit dated. I haven't uploaded any of the new ones. I'm going to link to the same ones that Greg is talking about, the newer ones we've done. But the manuals and such are on here. There's also a link there you'll see to the knowledge base, which is a new offering out of Israel, actually, that Mickey is putting together over there. And we're all contributing articles to that. So this is like your classic FAQ or knowledge base. You can actually search by subject, and there's quite a few in there. So if you're looking for answers, that's one tool. And then if you scroll on down a little bit there, Greg, I'll always have the latest version of software available here on the main page. And I'll have a little bit about it as far as the requirements, what the change was about, that sort of thing. So this version, when you download it from here, it also comes bundled with the original factory, if you will, installation manual, but also some guides and things that I've put together to help installers in the field. So you do get a little more for your money here, so to speak. It's a large zip file. It does take a while to download. So, and then down at the bottom, other links, kind of specialty things. There's some drivers and things of that nature, as you can see. And then, of course, our contact info, again, is down at the bottom. So,
with the link to that Facebook page.
Yeah,
Facebook
imagine
group.
that.
And I'm so excited to get started. I forgot to have everybody introduce themselves. Dave, do you want to introduce yourself?
Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join us on this Tuesday afternoon. My name is Dave Gordon. I'm the Regional Sales Manager for Rosslare East, USA, anything from the Mississippi East. I'm your go-to person, as well as Northern Canada, Eastern Canada, Toronto area, etc. I would be your contact person as well. Should you have any questions, need help with system design, please feel free to contact me throughout Larry's presentation here. I'll be posting my information, contact information in the chat. And like I said, feel free to let me help you design that system, and let's go out and sell some stuff.
Excellent. Larry, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Larry Barnes. I am the chief nerd. So I'm the nerd what is in charge, if you will. We're based in South Lake. There's 3 of us in the office. And right now, because of the COVID virus problem, quarantine, 2 of us are working remotely. So if you call in, you're going to go straight to voicemail. Please leave us a message. We get them immediately via email, and then we're trying to call back as quickly as possible. A lot of times I'm calling back before people are expecting it and surprising them. So we're trying to stay on top of them. We do get bogged down. We did today. It's been a busy day. But all our tech support is based here in South Lake, or in the surrounding suburbs, if you will. So if you need help, again, like Dave and Greg, if you need help designing a system or figuring out what you need, feel free to give us a call also if you can't get a hold of either one of them. We'll be happy to sit down and spend some time with you to figure out what you need, etc. So.
Thank you, Larry. And my name is Greg. I am Dave's counterpart west of the Mississippi, to include Illinois and Wisconsin. I'm the regional sales manager, and I'll put my contact information in the comments as well. Feel free to ask any questions. We got a question button you can hit there, and you can put it in chat, either or. As Dave said, we'll be monitoring that and try to get you answers as things come along. But again, really appreciate you taking time out of your day. Hope you find us informative. If you have any suggestions as things you'd like to see, don't hesitate to let us know about that as well. We certainly, this is for your benefit. We want to make this as helpful to you as possible. So if there are specific topics that you'd like to see, or something custom, let us know. We want to meet those needs. So without further ado, let's get started. Larry, would you mind? I'll unshare my screen and let you run with it.
All righty. Well, as soon as I find it, I will.
I bet it's there somewhere.
Shared the wrong screen again. I know, hard to believe. Okay.
And
Should
we're
see
live.
something that looks like a PowerPoint presentation now instead of my other blank monitor.
Yes, sir.
So today I'm going to go through the software. Now I'm not going to get bogged down in the installation process that much at this point. It can take too long. But I'm going to go through mainly the functionality in the software. So. AxTraxNG is a true client-server architecture. So in the background, you have the AxTraxNG server running, you have SQL Server, there's various components to it. And then the client is what you use, is where you make all your changes. That's the GUI that the end user or customer sees, or the tech when he's configuring it. We do offer integration with Hikvision or DAWA NVRs, so you can integrate with the access control events, capture snapshots or video, etc., including have pop-ups on the screen, capture it to file. I can do that on card swipes, so on any access event, access granted or denied, etc., plus any kind of alarm. So if I want to set up a door alarm for door held open, I can get a snapshot of who's holding the door open, that sort of thing. Integration directly with Rosslare biometric terminals. David was talking about those earlier. It does make it a one-stop shop, so to speak, with our Bio 9000 series biometric readers. Everything is managed from within AxTraxNG itself. You're not jumping back and forth between programs or having to copy data back and forth. It's all very nicely done, I believe. Offer support for up to 15 credentials of multiple types per user, and I will go through that in a minute. But suffice it to say, for every user, you can have their fob, they can have a PIN code, multiple fingerprints in the system, UHF tags for car parking, that etc. Plus both NFC and Bluetooth support where they can use their phone as a credential. We can do custom RFID formats and unique card types. We cover about 24 different industry card or RFID formats. But if you have one that's an oddball, give me a call and we can sit down and work through it. As long as you've got one or two cards, we need to have at least 2 cards available in a working system, we can usually figure out what the format is and come up with one that will work for everybody, where what we're printing out in the software matches what's printed on the card, if it is, etc. Parking management. This is not one we set up very often, but we do as a part of AxTraxNG, not an add-on per se. We do offer parking management, so you can control access to the parking lot just via access groups, obviously, but you can also control access by the number of people in the lot. So if you have 20 parking places and they're full, you can deny access so people aren't cruising around the parking lot. That can also be divided up if you've got a multi-tenant building by, according to tenants. So if each tenant's allowed 10 slots, you can limit them that way. So anti-passback, again, don't use this a lot, but it is it's becoming more common. But that's just to keep people from reusing the same credential to get in. We use that, oddly enough, a lot with parking management. If they're doing read in and read out to control access, we can also turn on that anti-passback function to prevent them from literally giving their card or their PIN code to someone else to allow them to park in an area. So use those a lot in conjunction. And then door interlock or a man trap. I've done that quite a bit here lately. A few jewelry stores, high dollar jewelry dealers, that sort of thing, but also at marijuana dispensaries. So any place handling a lot of cash like that. The client, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, I in all the excitement getting started, I forgot to introduce Diane, who's also on the call with us today, and she also does system design. So don't hesitate to reach out to the office too if you do have any questions or whatever. She'd be glad to assist you with that. Sorry, carry on.
All right, not a problem. So the AxTrax client, as I said, that's the GUI that you do all your work in. All right, but it is just that. It's just the front end. The AxTrax server is what actually communicates with your panels, be it via the LAN or a serial connection or whatever, and also with the SQL server that's running on the same machine, running in the background, which is what manages all the data. So all the data for the entire system configuration, as well as your event history, everything is stored in one SQL Server database. And the SQL Server takes care of all that communication with it. AxTrax Server Monitor sits down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Used to be known as the AxTraxNG Watchdog, but really it's a tool, and the monitor is a better name. It's really a tool we use for seeing what's going on with some of those background processes. And as I said, there's other third-party components that will get installed along the way. One of which, of course, right now we're still running Microsoft SQL Server 2012 Express by default. We do now support, and this is on the website there on the requirements, we now support up through 2017. So it's not limited to SQL Server 2012. That's just what's bundled with it and what would be installed by default. And what's installed by default is the Express version, meaning no license required. But if you're doing a very large system, we're definitely going to have to talk about getting a fully licensed copy of of SQL Server, excuse me, because we just can't handle, Express will not handle an unlimited size of a database. I was just working on one with the school district this morning where we tried to restore even a cleaned up database to the Express version, and it was still too large. It would not let us import it because of that. So just FYI. Operating system requirements that I was talking about. Basically anything from Windows 7 through Windows 10, not a problem. Server 2012 through 2016, not a problem. I believe that's actually up to the 2017 or 19 release now, but 32 or 64-bit. .NET Framework, we need 4.5 or later. The minimum requirement, dual core Intel, 2.4 gigahertz, we really recommend an i5 dual core or an i7, and a minimum of 4 gig, but again, for performance, so you're not sitting around waiting on things, we really recommend 8 gig of RAM. By no means a real high-end machine still. So LAN card, of course, required for if you're going to use TCP/IP networking with the panels. Hard drive space. Really, we don't use a lot of space, even with the database being stored locally. So 5 gig minimum. Again, unless you have a really huge database like a school district, that drive space is rarely a big issue. Network requirements. To keep it simple, we say the server needs to be located on the same physical LAN as the access control panels. Now, it can be located remotely. There are some tools. One of the reasons we say that, or the main reason we say that, is the simplest way to configure the system is all built into AxTraxNG. And by that, I mean to configure your IP addresses in your panels and get everything set up and running. And then you can always move the system off-site if need be, connect via VPN preferably, or even just using port forwarding. If you can't get the server to the network where the panels are for some reason, we do have some standalone tools. It just makes the setup initially a little more complicated. So nothing that we can't work around, and we'll be happy to get in with you and work through that stuff to get it set up. If you are doing a remote, one thing to keep in mind, we do not yet support DDNS. So at a remote site, you will need a static IP address. There is no workaround for it at this point in time, other than using a VPN. I'm sorry. If you're doing port forwarding, you don't have a VPN connection, you will need to use a static IP. If you're doing if you're using an AC825, the server PC also needs to be at a static IP address. And if you're trying to do an 825 remotely, that means you need a static IP at the site where the server is also. It's all due to the way they implemented the duplex communication with the 825. It's much, much easier and simpler to set up. If you're going to run an 825 remotely, set up a VPN connection with it. With routers as they are these days, you can get VPN connectivity on $50 to $100 routers. So would definitely recommend going that route.
Hey Larry, got a question about parking.
Okay.
The question is, I'm assuming you can count who comes into the parking garage, but not specific spots. Can you count specific spots?
No specific spots. You're right. It's just you're counting the number of people, and of course you can tell who from the access log who's come in. You can divide them up where you actually assign people to a group, so 3 people from tenant A came in, 4 people from tenant B are in there, but that's but not what slot they're in, though.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay.
And keep the questions coming. We appreciate them.
Yeah, I'll try to keep the QA pad open over here to the left on my desktop here. All right. So installation, whether you download it from my website or I'm not even sure there's even shipping with the CDs anymore. I know several people that have picked up boxes with CDs in them, or DVDs actually. Couldn't use them because their laptop or whatever didn't even have a drive. So If you download it from my website, from the AxTraxNG.com, that is a zip file. Be sure you extract it first. I throw that out there because it'll look like it'll let you install it. It'll even let you start the installer, but it will fail. And I get that call about once a week. I can't get it to install because, well, that's why. So once you've extracted it, you'll see the setup program. It'll be quite obvious. It'll say AxTraxNG and then the version number, blah, 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 and .exe or AxTraxNG setup.exe. You're going to right click on that and select Run as Administrator. Yes, even if you're logged in as the administrator, you must do that step. Right click, Run as Administrator. If you're not logged in and don't have admin privileges, this will be your first gate. That's the first place you're going to get stopped. You're going to have admin rights or someone there that does have to allow you to go ahead and run the installer. There is no workaround for that. And then I'm not going to go through all the screens here. I actually thought about trying to install it on a VM, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You click Next, OK, don't change anything. The one screen that confuses people a bit, well, this is the main menu here. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Once you check I agree, these boxes will become active. The only two you need is server and server monitor. And then you hit start. From here is where I was talking about. It's OK, next. The only exception to that is on the SQL Server. You're going to get a big pop-up screen for SQL Server. And typically, if you're doing a new install, a clean machine, you just leave the default box checked and hit go. That's it. There are some options here where you can tell it to skip the install or that you're upgrading from an older version and give it the credentials for the older, another instance of SQL. But typically, if you're doing a clean new install, you just leave default checked, hit go, and it will install SQL for you and configure it, and configure AxTraxNG accordingly to connect to it. So when it is done, you'll see a little pop-up that says it's complete. Click OK on that, and then you can close out the installer, and you should see the AxTrax server monitor running. All right. Yours will not have networks and such. It'll just say networks, server has no networks. That's normal. That means it's a fresh install, and you need to set something up. If you're doing, once it's all installed, if you're using an AC825 or if you plan to connect an external client to that server, you need to go back to the install directory where you ran the setup from and run my firewall.cmd little script. All that does is that adds an exception in the firewall where we can connect to or talk directly to the server. The AC825 requires that. An external or remote client requires that. If you're not using either one of those, you don't have to do that step. It only takes a moment. So on occasion, that script will not work. The instructions on how to do it are also included in here. Or again, give us a shout and we'll walk you through it. So once you've got the software up and running, the way we connect, one of the things I got to explain is on the legacy panels, and that's the 215, 225, 425. Those panels were originally serial devices, and the little controller in them still is. So the network module is a separate entity, if you will. It is a separate module under the cover there, talking to the serial controller behind it, serial-based controller. So the first step is to configure the network interface, tell the system how we're connecting. Excuse me. So you're going to go to AC Networks, hit the green plus, tell it the network type is TCP/IP. Now we do still support a direct serial connection to a panel. I didn't go through all of that. It's much simpler, obviously. But if you need to go through that, give us a shout. It doesn't take but a few minutes. So you set the network type to TCP/IP, and then you hit configuration. Don't worry about what's in here right now. Configuration is going to search the local LAN, that local subnet, for any of our devices. Then in this case, it's going to be the legacy panels. The 825s will not show up here. I've got another screen on that. It's actually handled separately. So by MAC address, which is printed on the front of the panels, you can select which one you want to configure first. For the newer panels, or I'm sorry, for the older panels, this gateway type will be MDIP32 on board. Actually, for the new ones, and that's anything that starts out like this one up here, the 0008, it'll say just MDN32. So, and you've got to manually tell it what IP address you want it to listen on. You want to set the serial speed down to 9600, and then tell it manually again what its subnet mask and the gateway address are. Once you have those filled in, you can hit apply. Very few of the panels, and this particular one I happened to pick was an older panel, I can tell by the MAC address here. Most of the new panels do not support DHCP at all. You won't even see this option. In the earlier panels, you could enable that temporarily, allow it to pull an address, and then go back, disable it, and use that as a static. So that's no longer an option. Once you have it the way you want it, hit apply. That writes it to the panel itself, as well as saving it to the database here on the PC, and then you hit OK to close out of this. This is just going over what I just said. Pardon me. If you don't know what the gateway address and subnet mask and such are, you can always go to a command prompt, run ipconfig. It'll give you that information. Normally, we just leave the panels at the default port of 1000. There's really no reason to change it unless you're doing a remote connection with multiple IP panels and you need to open ports for each one. Then you would need to put each panel at a unique IP address and a unique port number so we could do set the port forwarding up accordingly. All right. Oh, and if everything is correct, once you hit OK and on the network configuration and it goes to a status of OK, you should see the connected light on the older panels on the 215s and 225 IPs. You should see that connected light come on within a few seconds. All right, so once you have your network configured, status is showing OK, you're going to come in. This is a little bit more about troubleshooting. Basically, double check your IP config again. Make sure, see if you can actually ping the address. Typically, the problems they're either that there's multiple network adapters and maybe you picked the wrong network that it's on, or got something wrong in the IP address, that sort of thing. The Windows firewall rarely causes you any problems, but sometimes third-party firewalls can. If they've got a really tight lockdown network, they may have MAC filtering turned on, in which case that will definitely cause you grief. You'll have to get them to allow that panel on their network before you'll be able to do anything with it. So there's a lot of different things there that you can get into. Again, that's when don't beat your head against the wall. Give us a call and we'll try to get in with you and resolve it a lot quicker. All right. Once you've got your network working, you highlight the network, hit the find icon up here at the top, and this is going to go out to that IP address and it's going to start looking for any Rosslare devices that are connected there. You're going to remember with our IP panels, you can also daisy chain off of that non-IP panels via RS-485. Theoretically up to 32, I don't recommend going that high, but you can have multiple panels. When you hit find panels here, if all the dip switches are set correctly, everything's wired right, just sit back and wait because they should all show up in this screen. And once they do, then you can got a little off with my circles and arrows here. You check the box here, or you can hit select all, especially if you've got a bunch of panels listed. Just hit the select all button, and then you're going to hit add panels down here. One thing to keep in mind, there's one dip switch, well, there's 8 dip switches on the board, but one that causes more grief. Dip switch 3 selects between the 1 reader per door mode or 2 readers per door. By default, it's down, which is both readers controlling output 1 on a 2-door panel for read in, read out. That cannot be changed after the fact. You need to do it now. So if this little symbol here pops up and has 2, that's supposed to be a reader down there. If you see 2 of those, that means that panel is currently in the 2 reader per door mode. If dip switch 3 is up and it's still showing up that way, it means it needs to be power cycled and come back and do the find again. So, but you hit stop find, check all, and then hit add panels. And you may get this pop-up when you do that. If you're running a newer version of software, then what shipped with the panels, you'll get this warning. That is just a warning. Just click yes, I want to add them anyway. And then you're going to come in up here under network 1, you'll now have panel 1, and you're going to click on this silly icon that is firmware update. All right. It's going to pop up at this screen. It's going to select the file for you. You don't have to do anything. Just click OK. And then once that screen closes, you can come back here and highlight the network, and you can see the download count here in the status. Pardon me, just a second. Oops. All right. This will take somewhere around 5 minutes to complete. You'll see it go through, download the firmware, will count down, and it'll sit there at about 1 or 2, and it's going to be showing status initialized, and then it'll go connected. You'll see it download a little bit more. That's it pushing the configuration to it. So once all of that is done, well, once all of that is done, your panel will go to a status of OK, and it's ready for adding users. Now with the AC825, it's very similar, but you'll notice the step of finding the panels not in there. So again, you go to AC networks, but this time you change it to a type of AC type to AC825. Okay. One big difference. Sorry, one of the other texts is pinging me with a. When you go to create a network with an 825, you actually tell it if it's 1 reader per door or 2 right here. Initially, same step, you hit configuration. Difference here. This screen looks pretty much the same. You're going to see that the MAC address. You'll notice that the gateway type is going to show AC825. The default port on 825s, they picked 1818 for the port for it to listen on. Now, this is different than the old legacy panels. Each AC825 must be set at a unique IP address and port, both. So if you're adding a second 825, you're going to want to bump it up to like 1820, and I'll show you why in a moment. But again, you go through, set the IP address, gateway, etc., all the same way. Hit apply, then OK. Now, The reason you have to jump to 1820 is you'll notice, I don't have it on. No, don't have it, sorry. On the network configuration screen, the AC825 is listing on port 1818, but the AxTraxNG server is listening on port 1819 for traffic from that specific panel. That's how it keeps things straight. So each one will have its own pair of ports. 1818 that it listens on, 1819 that the server listens on. And so you've got to assign a unique set for each one. So I just always use, even ports for AC825s. That way I know I'm leaving space for another one. Not a problem. Okay, same thing, kind of the same troubleshooting steps here. One big one here is that firewall rule. If it's not in there, you will not be able to finalize the connection to the AC825. So be sure if you're running an 825, you have put the firewall rule in. Right. All right. Any questions at this point on the networking? I know I blew through a lot of stuff real quick. There's a lot of other things we can do, such as remote connections. I'm not going to go through all of those. Those can really get bogged down. So.
I don't see anything in the chat box.
All right. Just a moment. Answer Dust's question real quick.
While Larry does that, I wanted to point out if you, I'm sure you picked up, and if you were on the hardware calls, you notice there's a substantial difference between the way the 215, the 225, and the 425 is configured versus the 825. And while they're all the same, all play nice together, and of course manufactured by Rosslare, the 825 is a true enterprise level solution. You're able to do things with the 825s that are just simply not possible with the 425, as far as the way you can expand it, and it's the size of install and those type of things. Now, granted, if you have 1,000 reader install with you can do that with a 425 or 225, and you do that with the 825. Just the way it accomplishes the same goal is different. It's certainly a more robust solution.
All right. So once you have found your panel, allowed it to do the firmware update, etc., there's not a lot to configure on the panel itself. Right here, I'm showing if you come up to the network, double click here in the left-hand column, or click to edit. That pulls up the panel properties window. If you hit test down here at the bottom, you should always get this window up, and it'll be confirming what the current firmware version is, the panel type, and whether it's got a daughter board or not in the case of the 225 and the 425s. So that's just a real quick test for bidirectional communication with the panel. Probably handier when you're doing a new system, I mean an existing system, and trying to troubleshoot issues with it. But so on the doors, there's really not a whole lot you have to do here. By default, the request to exit button at manual door operation is enabled. You have a 4-second door open time or extended open time of 8 seconds. Automatic relock is a function that if you have door monitor contacts, once you unlock the door, if the door shuts in less than 4 seconds, it will relock then instead of waiting. Now, with a 4-second unlock time, that's not a big deal, but with the extended door open time, if it didn't, you do run a higher risk of someone slipping in behind you, grabbing the door and getting in behind you. So that's the automatic relock function. You don't have to use it. If there's nothing connected, you can just leave it as is on the default. But if you're running door monitor contacts, that's what that relock is about. First person delay on automatic unlock. If you're going to put a door on a timer to unlock during certain hours, if you enable this, that means someone's got to swipe their card or enter their PIN code after the start of the schedule to ensure that someone is there, so that you don't have doors unlocked on a snow day and there's nobody in the building. So door held open and forced open alarms, again, requires a door monitor contact be connected. And the difference here is that forced open means that the door was opened without a request to exit or a card being swiped, hence the reason it defaults to a 0 delay. Door held open defaults to 30 seconds. Now you can adjust that to whatever you want. Door held open won't kick in unless the door was opened with a request to exit or a card swipe or PIN code, and then the timer expires. So, and from that, we can generate alarms and events from that, or alarms which will trigger the cameras or emails, etc. So.
And they need a door contact to take advantage of that feature.
Right. All of those features do require a door monitor contact be connected. That's correct. All right. Door manual operation enabled. All that means is this first icon, which is always visible, is where you can get in to override the doors. You can open them temporarily if somebody needs in, or you can lock it down manually. If they are open on a schedule, you can hit close and lock everything down immediately. So. On the readers, one thing I didn't mention, you can, and right here is where you would change the description of your door so that in the event log or in this screen here, it would show up with a name like front door, back door, not, one panel, one door, one. Come down here to readers, same thing. You can change the name of the reader. That one's maybe more important than the door, quite frankly, because this is what's going to show up for the location in your event log down here. It's also what you'll be working with when you're developing access groups, which we'll talk about in a second. So if nothing else, name your readers. Operation mode defaults to card only, but the options are card or PIN, PIN only, and then there's a card plus card you can enable there also, so that it takes multiple cards and you can determine how many users. This screenshot was actually taken from a slightly older version. This has changed up a little bit now. Now they refer to this just as multiple authentications. So you can have card plus PIN, or now you can have card plus biometric, or whatever your other authentication method you're using. Reader formats, as I said, we can do custom reader formats. There's about 24 of them out of the box. The default is always going to be the 26-bit Wiegand, and that does mean 26-bit with facility code. Yes, you've got to enter the facility code unless you go create a different card format that does not have one included, which doesn't take but a minute to do, but out of the box, it's going to be looking for it. And that becomes particularly annoying if you're doing a takeover and they have HID cards where the facility code's not printed on the card. So the only way to determine the facility code is to go scan the card in. So yes, we can work around that. Give us a call. We can also set readers up to handle 2 different card formats. Again, very handy in takeover situations, or when the system maybe is embedded in another building and the building has its own cards. The only restriction here is they must be different lengths. So if you're using some 26-bit cards, then the others have got to be something else, like a 34 or 37-bit card. You can't have 2 different card formats with the same length. The system could never figure out which one's which. Keypad type, again, if you enable a pin pad up here, then you have to tell it what type of keypad you're running. With ours, that's always Wiegand 6 Rosslare. Others vary by manufacturer, but there's about 4 different selections there. So. Check facility code only is kind of a shortcut where if you need to get a system up and running real quick, you got a box of 25 cards, we can just tell it, okay, any card with a facility code of 123 is valid for tonight. and you're up and flying. You can't tell who came and went when. You won't even tell you the card number. It doesn't bother. It just validates only the facility code. Fine for a workaround, but don't use that for your day-to-day operation. Muster, I haven't set one of these up for anybody yet, but basically you can set up a reader or readers as a muster point in the event of a building evacuation or emergency. You can have everybody swipe their card. If they don't show up and they've been in the building, you can actually run a report to see who's left, that sort of thing. So not a very common one, but we do support such a thing. All right, I'm going to jump into adding the users and cards. The first step, we're going to do access groups first, because that's how we control access rights. Who can go where and when. So, and this is something a lot of people don't give much thought, be it the installer and certainly not the end users up front. They need to really have kind of a plan going into this. If you throw everybody in as master today and then decide you want to change something, you can't change the master access group. That's a system default. It's always going to have 24/7 access, every door, all the time. So you need to think about access up front and put your users all into an appropriate access group. Now, if you don't know what that is going to be long term, you can still give a new group called employees or called residents or whatever. You can give them 24/7 access today so you can at least change that group later if you want to start restricting it. So keep that in mind. So access groups, I'm going to start out with setting a schedule. Now you don't have to have a schedule. There's a 24/7 schedule that's in there by default. But if you do want a custom schedule, then you would go to timing and time zone first, green plus to create a new one. You can name it. And then what you do here is you left click, you hold your mouse button down, drag it down, and then that'll give you a stack of rectangles like this. Then you right click in there and say create, and it'll turn solid like this. So this is 8 to 5. I was going for Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 with closed for lunch. I mean, pretty straightforward. That's going to be my business hour schedule. Now that same schedule can be used for multiple things. It doesn't have to be used just for an access group. If you wanted to have a door that's unlocked on that same schedule, you can use it for that also at the same time. You don't have to build separate ones for everything. Now to create my access group, again, I'm going to come in here to access groups, hit the green plus. All you're creating here is the heading or the name. All right, click OK. Now you're going to highlight that group name. My boxes here kind of overlapped, but basically you're going to expand the master group and then going to select the readers from master that you want to put in your new group. And then if you want to set a schedule other than always, you check this box and select your schedule. That's it. This is not, it's kind of confusing. People think it's taking things out of the master group. No, it's just adding them to your new group. It's not affecting any other group when you're doing this. Then click OK. And you now have an access group. All right. So to add users, come down the tree here to users, expand that, expand departments and users. Now you can highlight department and you can create your own department names. You can see I've got one under here called test. You know, you can have employees, residents, staff, you know, whatever makes it easier for you to find people. It has nothing to do with their access rights. That's merely for organizational purposes to make it easier for you to find. So I'm going to go to general. I'm going to tell it I want to create a new user. This is just entering one user, one card, that sort of thing. Plug in their name, select an access group. Here I'm selecting my Monday through Friday 8 to 5 group. And then I'm going to select the codes tab up here at the top. And I'm just going to manually enter the number off of their card. Again, my default is Wiegand 26-bit. If this were different and there was no facility code, for instance, you wouldn't be able to enter anything here. So I'm going to enter my facility code and card number. If you want to assign them a PIN code, you can come down here and assign PIN codes. The duress PIN code, I rarely set this up, but you can assign a person a second PIN code that, if it's used, can generate an alarm back at, say, a security station. So yes, I know Larry's coming in the door. It will still let him in, but it will also trigger an event in the AxTraxNG log for a security guard. Click OK to save it. When you click OK on anything here, that writes it out to the panel. It writes it to the database locally, but it also sends it to the panel. So there is no separate download function that you have to go trigger every time you make changes. Now, we can also add a box of cards, and there's two methods here. One, you're just going to add the cards to the system and then assign them one by one to people. It saves you from having to type all the card numbers in. You just type the first one, tell it how many. The other option is you actually create users with dummy names like user 123. Again, a lot of times we'll do this to get something up and running on Friday afternoon, but you really need to come back in then, or the user does ultimately, and figure out who's got what cards and put the real names in. So now, if I create a batch of cards, I'm still missing that slide, guys. Sorry. If I create a batch, load a batch of cards in and assign them one by one, when you go to that credentials tab, you'll have this option to add from list, and you just select the cards that you just batch loaded. I'll show you what the screen looks like in a minute to add them. And you can add up to 15 cards per user. Now, I've seen people do that and put like an entire office on one username, Office 104. You still can't tell who's coming and going, though. Kind of defeats the purpose. So again, best practice is assign them to people, Bill and Office 104, whatever. And then once you're done here, hit OK, and again, that writes it out to the panel. Now, this is the screen should have had over there. If you select just add cards here, you give it the quantity, the starting card number, and the facility code. And that's it. Now, these are just going to create cards, like I said, and then you have to manually add them to users like I just showed. If you want to do the other option, which is you can create the users at the same time, you change this to add users and cards, how many, again, the starting card number you want to use. This cannot be, you can't use this to assign people to cards that are already in the system. It doesn't work that way. So these would have to be another batch of cards that are not currently in the system. What department you want to put them in, what access group you want to put them in. If you want to generate a PIN code at the same time, you can. They can either be sequential. Again, don't recommend. Always go for the random PIN codes. Facility code and hit OK. And this is going to generate a string of users called user 123, and it'll match whatever their user number is in the system. Now, you can always come back and edit those later. It does save you some of the time of setting it up, but it also leaves you with a stack of cards. It's like having a stack of master keys or activated, keys laying around, that if anybody gets a hold of one, you have no idea who it is or anything. So I prefer to put them in, leave them inactive, assign them as they're handed out. It's much more secure. We can do an import from a spreadsheet. You can, to create a template to do that with, you can come in here and select export before you start doing anything, obviously. Select export, hit select all just to check all the boxes here, hit OK, and that'll give you an empty template spreadsheet to work from. And when you start entering the data, the user ID needs to be just a whole number starting with 1 and just sequentially numbered. You can use, in Excel, they've made that real easy. You just type 1, 2, and 3 on 3 rows, and then do a copy, and it'll sequentially number it for you. Yeah. You've got to have a name. They can't both be blank. You don't have to fill in both, you first and last, and certainly not middle, but you need to have something in one of them to be a valid user. Then, of course, you enter their access group. Yeah, I've got a picture of it here. You know, plug in what department you want them to go into, what access group you want them to go into. PIN code optional if you're using them. You don't have to put anything there. And then their card numbers. So this is what the spreadsheet template looks like. I did take out some unused columns here to get it all down on a screen I could print out. You just ignore anything you're not using. Leave the date to and from fields blank. It'll fill in the from date with today's date and leaves the until blank basically. So, and once you have your data in here, one thing you do have to do, everything must be formatted as text before it will import. So once you've got everything in, got all your numbers typed in, come in here and click on this upper left-hand corner to select all cells, and then right-click on one and select Format Cells and select Text. So it overrides what's there currently. And when you go to import, it's just like we did to make the template. Choose Options, select Import Export. In this case, you're going to select Import. You're going to browse to your file. You can hit Select All, or if you're not using all the fields, you can just uncheck them and check only the user number that is required, a first and/or last name, and your card number and facility code. You can also specify, if you have done a custom card format, you can specify that here so things get imported correctly. Typically on a new system, yes, you want to import the departments, yes, you want to import the access groups and car parking groups if you're using them, so, which we haven't talked about yet. And hit OK. All right, that's the high points of the basic setup, if you will. I'm going to talk about some other options here in a moment, but I'll slow down and stop for a moment. And is there any questions so far?
I don't see so. I don't see any.
All righty. As I mentioned earlier, we can add additional client machines. They do need to be on the same LAN as the server. You can set them up remotely by doing port forwarding, obviously. We recommend it be on the same LAN as the server. Makes it much simpler to set everything up. So here you're going to have to, A, have done the firewall rule that I mentioned earlier, and B, you need to know what the IP address is of the server machine, and it should be a static address because, again, if it changes for any reason, your clients won't work all of a sudden. So you run the installer the same way. It's the same installer, same file, run it as administrator, check agree, and except in this case, you're going to select only the AxTrax client. Hit start, and basically it's going to install in just a minute. It takes very little time. If you're on Windows 10, this is much simpler. To make use of my configuration tool to set the IP address, you've got to make sure it is run as administrator. Otherwise, you have to go browse to it and do that manually. Because unfortunately, by default, it doesn't have admin rights, so therefore it can't write the config file that's in the program files directory. So if you're on Windows 10, it's very easy. You right-click on it once it's installed here. Go into your Start menu, right-click on the one for Configuration Tool, select More, and then select Run as Administrator. And that'll bring you up to this screen. You're going to go to Client. You're going to plug in the IP address of the server machine, not the panel, the server PC, and port 1001. Again, it's always the same port, 1001. I wish they'd make it the default. They didn't. They won't. They haven't. So don't change anything else. Actually, none of these others would be valid. It won't do anything, but go to Client, Server Services. This doesn't matter, you're not using them. And set the IP address for the server. That's it. Hit the double diskette up here to save your changes. Pardon me. And you're done. Now, I've done another webinar on a lot more AC links, but I'm going to show the most common one here. This is how to put a door on a schedule. So you're going to expand out the menu here to AC links, green plus. You're going to select your source type is going to be output. So this one does seem a little backwards to me, always has. So your source is the door that you want to put on the schedule. Your event is automatic operation. You can change this description if you want to, you know, say front door auto or something like that, make more sense out of it. So you select the door that you want to put on the schedule, and then you come down here and select time zone. As soon as you select this automatic operation, it fills in the destination. You don't have to worry about that. So select automatic operation, select the time zone, and hit OK. And now if you have enabled first person delay, the door will not unlock until someone goes and swipes their card or enters their PIN code. Very simple. Doesn't jump right out at you though, I admit, and confused me immensely at the first. So. Anti-passback. Again, we do anti-passback multiple ways. This is the simplest form. It's actually done at the reader level. So you come in here, highlight your reader, hit edit, go to the options tab, tell it when you want it to do timed anti-passback, set how long. Timed anti-passback means the same card or credential will not work again for X amount of time. The one place I have used this that was rather unique was for a tanning booth. By state law, they were only allowed to use the tanning booth once in a 24-hour period. So they put a card reader on it to start it, and you swipe your card, you get one shot at it for the day, and you have to wait 23.5 hours before you can use it again. So there are creative ways to use some of this stuff. The true anti-passback requires a read-in, read-out. It requires an entry reader and an exit reader on the same panel. So in this case, you're going to highlight the network and go to the edit function here, edit the panel. Okay, double-click on it and go to the anti-passback tab instead of going to the reader like we did last time. Automatic anti-passback, set that to whatever time schedule you want to have anti-passback on, typically, 24/7. Hard or soft, and this applies to the other one also. Hard means you absolutely won't get in unless somebody manually lets you in. Soft means an event will be logged, an alarm will be generated, and you'll get a stern talking to. So that's what a soft is, but you still got in. So. And then you select which readers that you want to implement the anti-passback on here. So in my case, readers 3 and 4 were my entry and exit points that I was worried about. Now there is another global anti-passback I'm not going to go into here, where you can have multiple entry points, multiple exit points, and it does get more complicated to set up. That is one that's considered an active option, in meaning that it does not all run on the panel itself. It requires connectivity with the server machine to track all of it, because it can be across panels. So, and the panels do not communicate with each other, by the way. They are standalone. They'll run on their own, but they do not communicate with each other. So any of these options, and I'll try to flag them, nothing I've gone through yet. Parking is another one, though, that does require the server to be running and connected, but they're considered active options. So the global anti-passback and some things like that do. Door interlock, again, man trap, very simple to set up. Again, highlight the network, edit your panel again, double click in here or hit edit, go to options, just come down here to door interlock and tell it which doors you want to have in this interlock. So again, I'm only selecting 3 and 4. So doors 1 and 2 can be in any state they want to be. Doesn't matter, they're totally independent. But 3 and 4 can never be unlocked or open at the same time. It will by default want to see the status of your door monitor contacts. If you don't have door monitor contacts, you need to go set it to a state where it'll think open is locked. And in that case, it's just controlling when the doors are unlocked. But by default, it will look for the door monitor, and it'll want to know if the door is even open. So parking. I'm putting together a whole presentation on parking to go into a lot more detail on it. So I'm not going to get too deep into it here. We're running out of time. You go to access areas first to create your parking area, and you can't give it a better name than this. That's not a problem. And you tell it what your entry point is and what your exit point is. And yes, you can have multiples in this case, because again, remember, this is an active one. This feature does require the server to be up and running and connected for it to work. Once you've created the parking area, come down here to car parking, tell it you want to create a new parking lot. Again, you can name that, front lot, back lot, which access area it is. And if you're just doing a very simple by a maximum counter in the area, just select access area and the maximum count. You got 20 parking spaces, you put 20. When it hits that 20, it will quit allowing people in. You can also set up using AC links. You can have it generate an alarm for an operator. So if you've got a security desk or something, they'll know that the parking lot's full. But more importantly, you can also trigger a relay that in turn can be used to trigger a sign or a light or something like that saying a lot full. And then as people read out, that count will go back down and it will resume automatically, allowing people back in. Now, the other option here that allows you to do, like I said, a multi-tenant building, if you will, is you select by user groups. And then once you select that, that takes you to another screen here where you define your car parking groups. And you can, again, name these the actual business day or whatever. And you say how many slots, what's the maximum count for that group of people, all right? So if you've got 2 different groups and all 10 of the tenant A slots are full, another person in that group comes up, they're going to get denied. Now, you can't do a lot full of that because tenant B hasn't used all their slots. Tenant B comes up, they'll still get in until their 10 is full. Their 10 slots are full. So, and then the way you assign a person, and this has to be done on a person-by-person basis. This is independent of the access group. That just determines if they have access to the reader at all. This determines their parking group here. You put the individual users into the slot, tenant A, tenant B, etc., and they're assigned. Okay. That's the presentation for today on the software. I was trying to give you more of a feel for the capabilities than how to actually get in and do each and every little thing in the software. That would be much more involved, and without some real hands-on, obviously it's not going to stick around very well unless you're using it. So